Hello.
Hey, Pavlos, how are you today?
Not bad. How are you?
Doing all right. I got power. Just in time.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you were without power the whole couple of days?
Yeah, it went out, what was it? Monday or Tuesday? Yeah, Monday morning. And then
Wow.
and then it came on briefly, which was good because we got a chance to like recharge things. And then it went off, which we kind of knew was possible.
I was gonna ask what were you doing without power? Do you have a generator or something?
So that's actually a good question. Because we have fiber internet, it works even when the power in the area is out, which is really cool. Then I got one of those, I guess it's an 800 watt battery. It's about the size of a lunchbox, weighs about 15 pounds from EcoFlow. And I run, it only draws like 30 watts of power between the internet router, the switch, and like one or two other devices, all just 30 watts, which is really low. So I tested it out and the power went out and it worked. So we were able to keep our internet and our Wi-Fi and stuff like that. But
Nice.
it's about, I don't know, I want to say 100 meters away. So it because it's outside in a utility shed, the reception for Wi-Fi, like we only get it if we're like pressed up against the window of our chair. But we do have a switch that comes into here, so there is Ethernet. I just need to figure out if I can get a power backup hooked up to that. So a few things that we're figuring out, but yeah, there's that, and then if that runs out, I have a gas generator that I can charge the whole thing back up on. So the whole thing lasts almost a day, and then the generator can charge it like five, six times. What's going on, Andrew?
Well,
Hey, hey. I love the sound tiles that you have behind you. Those are awesome.
yeah, thanks. I don't know, pretending to be a YouTuber.
Yeah, it's hard to get the sound just right. The last place I lived, there was it was an 8 by 10 room, and there was nothing I could do unless I like draped things on all of the walls. And yeah, it just gets a little excessive after a while.
That's actually why I did this. There's a lot of flat surfaces, so it
Yeah.
just kind of bounce sound.
Other things that I've seen people do is use those like large like movers blankets and just hang those up on pegs on the wall. But yeah, all right, we got a couple more people. So we got Natalie and Eric also joined. Welcome, welcome.
Hello.
Uh,
Hey,
wait for a few more people to join, then we can maybe do some introductions. I was just telling Pavlovs that I just got power back just
Oh
today.
no.
It's been out since Monday. We got about
Seriously? Oh no.
we got 18 inches of snow. Yeah,
oh
like
wow.
nonstop, which is
Where-
exceedingly rare for this location, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's like one of the most moderate areas of Canada.
Yeah, my wife's sister lives in Ashland, Oregon, and they got like 4 or 5 feet where
Yeah,
she was, which
Whoa.
is crazy too. Like, you
yeah.
know,
This is it just
so
kept it kept cycling back. So it was just basically precipitation just kind of like cycling back on top of the general area over here is nuts. And we might get more in like a week or so.
I don't know. Yeah, they've been saying it's gonna snow here for like every day for a week and it hasn't, but today it started snowing, but it melted before it even hit the ground. So I don't know if that means like we're getting a blizzard kind of thing this year that we get about every 5 years or not, but hopefully not.
Yeah, without proper infrastructure or systems and stuff, it can be a real.
Yeah.
I think
It's
the preparation that you really have to worry about is will you be able to stay warm and will you have water? Like if you can't get those two things
yeah.
right, then you're in a bad way.
Yeah. I think that where we are in Washington, what makes it scary is that it'll snow and then it'll rain a whole bunch.
Yeah, and then you get rain.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the worst, especially when it gets below like 32 degrees and then the rain is freezing, and then you've basically got ice covered snow everywhere. And
Yeah, not good for avalanches either if you're near the mountains. But yeah, we actually, thankfully we had enough water, but it was getting to the point where we just took some precautions and started melting snow on our stovetop.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a bit much. So since we're all kind of gathered here, at the beginning when we start, I do want to make sure that everybody knows we do record these. These meetups are something that is partly governed by the Drupal Community Code of Conduct, so recording it helps with that. Obviously, if you don't want to be recorded, you can either go off camera, go off audio, and just watch. That's certainly your choice. But whatever you say will be logged in a document. If you want it removed from the document, let me know. But anything you say in the chat, I'll put in that document. I'll add a link while I'm thinking about it to our chat here. And then anyone who joins can see that. And then we can get underway. The document does use tabs. So the one that I'm linking to right now is the tab for today's call, but there is an overview. So if you haven't seen that, there you go. All right, so that's our document for today. Because it is recorded, I do take the recordings and I put them up on YouTube. And when everything's said and done, because, well, you are part of the Drupal community, and we want to make sure that you get credit for participating and attending. There is a Drupal project for our user group here, and I set up an issue for each meetup, and I give credit for everyone who attends. So if you haven't yet, make sure that I have your Drupal.org username. You can do that in the Slack channel if you want. If not, I'll do my best to dig you up. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. If we have any late joiners, they can chip in as well. Today's topic, looks like there we go, Sandri. So today's topic is kind of a two-parter. I know DrupalCon's coming up real soon, so I think that it would be important, depending on, the level of, what's going on, Andrew? I think depending on the level of interest that our group here has, we can dive into either DrupalCon, like if it's your first time attending and you're interested, or you're kind of on the fence, or if you're kind of a veteran and just you want your voice heard. All of those things are kind of open season when it comes to DrupalCon. I want to be careful with discussion and not like get too far into griping, just making it overly negative. Honestly, if there is a legitimate thing that we need to bring up with like the Drupal Association, let's certainly talk about that. But I do want to try to be productive, efficient, and more importantly, helpful to our community here. So let's get underway. Oh, the other part of the topic, I said there were two. Drupal's market demand. I think this might be a to be continued sort of topic if we get into more DrupalCon stuff, but Drupal's market demand, I think, is really hitched to the idea of DrupalCon in some respects, like whether or not somebody chooses to go. But also there have been a lot of people who have lost their jobs in the past year or so. And I think Drupal's market demand is certainly a part of that conversation. It's not the only part, but it is a part of that conversation. So I'd personally love to talk about that. But if there's not too much interest, we can move on to other things. So let's take a few minutes. Please mention your name, contact details, background, what you've been working on, thorn in your side, things that have been great. Just take a few minutes, say whatever you want about yourself. And I'm just going to go down the list of people who I see. So when I call on you, you can either respond or you can just have an awkward silence of 6 seconds and we'll move on to the next person. So Pavlos, you're up first.
I figured. Well, hi everyone. I'm Pavlos. You can find me on Drupal.org under Pavlos Dan, similarly on social media, LinkedIn, and so on. I think I'm Pavlos Dan there. Anyway, yeah, I've been doing Drupal for about 16 years now. Yeah, I'm currently working on a freelance project with Chad for Bluefly.io.
Cool.
All right, good stuff. So, Pavlos, I think Andrew, you're up next.
Yeah, I'm next. Yeah. Actually, it's a good exercise. Every time when you have this is self-presentation, when you're seeking a new job position, it's like, hello, I'm Andrew. Something like this. Yeah. Here, the same. Yeah. I'm Andrew. I think, yeah, I'm in a Drupal 15 years old, something like this. Yeah, I start from a Drupal. I remembered Drupal 5 and work pretty close. Start from Drupal 6, and yeah, at the moment we already on Drupal 11. Yeah, time passed so quickly. At the moment I'm working for PHSA. Oh, it's pretty famous organization in Vancouver. In BC and in Vancouver. Also, I would like mention I have some country patch for Drupal core, especially for layout builder models. And I'm going to share a link, and please support our patch, and it would be nice. Yeah, it's some kind of improvements for a layout builder. It's extra button, but yeah, it will be nice if you support us. Yeah, that's me about me. Thank you.
Right on, right on. Yeah, share any links if you want in the chat. That will be captured in our notes, and I'll add any links to our resources section too if you want.
Okay, just pop up in my mind.
Right on. Andrew Morton, you're up next.
Hey, let's see. So I've also been in Drupal about 15 years. I live in Seattle. Let's see. Recently started a new gig with Cigna Healthcare. They've got a pretty big Drupal team. They were recently hiring a bunch of people, so people were looking. That was an option. Yeah, I kind of bouncing back and forth between working in agencies and freelancing. I've kind of been trying to get into consulting over the last few years, getting into mentoring tech teams, helping them grow, helping them improve their productivity and process. But I also do a lot of Drupal development myself. I helped with PTVDUG, organizing the conference. So also just generally a community member and volunteer organizer. Yeah, that's it for me.
Right on. Well, thank you, Andrew. Natalie, I think you're next.
Hello, I'm Natalie Kainaru. I'm actually based out in New York State, not on the West Coast. So it's, technically getting close to my bedtime, but I love coming to these meetings, so it's awesome. And let's see here. I'm doing some contract fractal work with Bluefly. And I've been working with Drupal for the past, say about like 12, 13 years or so. And yeah, it's, pretty wild ride to go from Drupal 6 all the way to 11. Time definitely flies by fast.
It does. It does. Well, great to have you, Natalie. Thank you for taking the late time. Really do appreciate it. We have adopted the kind of informal phrase for this group that it's scheduled for Pacific time, but everybody's welcome. So thank you very much for joining. Since we have a couple newcomers, just want to do the quick preamble. This group is covered by the Drupal Community Code of Conduct. Part of our mission is to make sure that we stick to that. If you have any questions about that, let me know. We do record these calls partly for that reason. And anything that you say here will be uploaded to YouTube. So if you don't want it recorded, don't say it. Stay off camera, stay off mic. Also, the chat, we do copy that to a document. So if you want anything removed from that after the fact, just let me know and I'll take it out of the document. That's perfectly fine. And I'll share the notes in the recording once we're done with this. But at the beginning of our meetings, we do introductions. If you don't want to introduce yourself, just sit there awkwardly for 6 seconds and we'll move on to the next people. All right, I think we got 2 more. So Rick, you're joining after a few of these folks introduce themselves. So if you missed their introductions, you can see that in the recording. So can you introduce yourselves and share anything that you're currently doing?
Certainly, I'm Rick Hawkins. I'm RL Hawk on Drupal.org. I've been working with Drupal for about coming up on 16 years. I lead the Drupal team at Slalom, which is a medium-sized tech consulting company, and have been involved with a lot of planning for the Pacific Northwest Drupal Summit and other events around Seattle, and which is where I live.
Awesome. Nice to see you again, Rick.
Yeah.
You're up.
Me. I've been did you say me or did I hear the wrong?
Sorry, I said Chris, but we will definitely pick you up here.
Okay.
Oh,
Chris can...
Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm half out of it. Firstly, I apologize for being late. And I had a massage for the first time in a year. And I'm like, it's like 5 after. I'm like, oh yeah, I want to go to that. So I really apologize. Chris McGrath, longtime Drupaler, started out in Drupal 6 like in 2010. Have created various companies, agencies, currently CEO of Esteemed. Some of you guys know us in the community. We use Drupal in our products. We support a lot of Drupal agencies still. It's a big part of our business as far as staffing is concerned. And, you know, I'm a real passionate community member as far as like where it's going as a product. And, you know, it's been a transformative thing in my life. So I always try to do everything I can for the community.
All right. Nice to have you here, Chris. And Eric.
Eric, me, right? I'm Eric, sick of it, SIKOFITT, pretty much everywhere except for on Instagram. Someone stole that, so I have an extra T on there. I've been in Drupal a long time, but with the past maybe year or two, I've gotten into the community and kind of dove headfirst into organizing stuff that really fascinates me. I work at Stanford for 18 years. Recently, I've been kind of looking at the queues and trying to get Drupal 11 compatibility like pushed through on things, and also working with Backdrop, which is Drupal by proxy, on a Stanford decanter theme for Backdrop. So yeah, pretty busy, but happy to be involved in everything.
For sure. Sounds like quite the workload, and thanks for being here, Eric. Well, a couple quick housekeeping things before we get into our topic. This group started back in, what was it? I think November last year, December last year. We actually started this based out of a discussion with the Vancouver Drupal users group, something that hasn't really happened too much lately, and in-person meetups are something that can be really challenging for folks. So I think it's important to provide a virtual space for accessibility purposes. I live remotely. I'm like 3 hours from Vancouver if the ferry's running. So if I go there, I'm probably staying the night there, which is certainly something that I do on occasion, but it's not something that I do frequently. And I think that's an example of how a lot of people are very dispersed throughout many countries here. So the heart of our group here is to really help support the Drupal community through meetups, something that I think many of us started our Drupal journey going to local things, or at least we found ourselves here. But more importantly, I think it's important to share this opportunity to go to meetups with people who might not live around big cities or might just have families or busy lives. So I want to be sure that each one of you feel welcome here. If you feel like there's something that you'd like to change or like to see happen in these meetups as we get through them, please let me know. We'll try to make this a group effort. But more importantly, I think we want to make sure that we're reaching out to folks who can attend these and make this something that they're aware is available for them. We'll typically set a topic for each one of our meetups. In the previous meetup, we'll at least talk about it, and then we'll carry that into our Slack channel for a little bit of debate, because we want to make it something that's interesting for a lot of people. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of people. So the topic we came up for this meetup is actually kind of twofold. The last one was about Drupal CMS. You can watch that in the previous recording. In this one, we're going to talk about either DrupalCon or Drupal's market share, or a bit of both. DrupalCon, because it's coming up really quickly, and I think it's important if anybody here is planning to go, on the fence about going, if it's your first time, if you're a veteran and you'd love to see things improve at DrupalCon, this is a place where we can talk just as a community. Nothing is bound by any agreements. It's just talking. I think that would be a good discussion, timely wise. Drupal's market share, or market demand rather, is a topic I think I'm very passionate about, and I think many people are right now, because, well, a lot of people have lost their jobs. The industry right now is a little bit chaotic. And I think something that we can do to help one another as a community is to kind of hash that out, identify what opportunities there are, and also help our other peers who aren't on this call with what we can share with each other. Just observations, recommendations, that sort of thing. So I think we can start our discussion with DrupalCon. Maybe I can ask a question for the group. Is anybody planning to go and hasn't gone before?
The rule 6 seconds, right?
Yeah, 6 seconds.
It's going to be in Seattle, right? In USA?
Atlanta. Yeah.
Atlanta. Yeah. It would be my pleasure, but yeah, I don't have any American visa, and I think, yeah, this time I'm going to pass.
Okay. Anybody else not going for any reasons?
I'm on the planning phase. I can't say whether I'm going or not yet.
Okay.
I'm still figuring it out.
Is it a logistics thing, just trying to get everything sorted with your week and all that?
Mostly figuring out the costs, because I missed the early bird pricing, and I need to figure out what else, and like add up how much the whole thing is gonna cost and figure it out from there.
It adds up.
It really does. A lot of times, at least since 2017, I try to find volunteer opportunities, which can frequently give you at least a free ticket. Not always, but it's at least something to take a look into. So if not this year, if you're interested, definitely talk to folks in the Drupal Association and the planning committees and whatnot.
Yeah.
But you're right about the cost of travel, lodging, and something that I think a lot of people forget is food. It all adds up really fast.
Don't forget booze.
If you're drinking, for sure. Which actually brings up another good point. We were talking quite a bit about doing some non-alcohol centric social events, because I think there have been a couple of things that have come up. One, there are obviously people who don't drink for various reasons. Two, some people might not feel safe in an environment, whether it's, professional appearances or even being taken advantage of. So not to pick on that, but it is something that has recently been a conversation in the DEI group and the DrupalCon planning committee is at least having a handful of options. So I think game night
Now that
is,
you mention it,
yeah. But yeah, in terms of any folks who are going, are you going for all the days or are you only going for a few days?
I think if
I'll
I'll
be
go
there
for
all
the
week.
whole thing.
Yeah, I'll be there for the whole like what is it, 3 days? 24th through the 27th, I believe it is.
we're sponsors, so I gotta go in Sunday night.
It all set
Turned
up.
out I couldn't even. I'm like probably won't even get there. Like they'll probably be like closed, you know. But I wasn't gonna like get on a flight at 6 a.m. just to go do that, you know. So I was like, yeah, well, whatever. I'll get bright and early Monday.
I'm gonna be there Sunday after Sunday evening or whatever, because flights out of here is like there was no real options, and I'm not
We're
gonna
probably on the same flight.
yeah get to the
Yeah.
airport at 4 a.m. to
Yeah, I
get
think it
out
was like
there.
3 o'clock or something like that.
Yeah, it's
And got
crazy.
in at 6:30 or something. The only
And then
other one was early in the morning.
the connecting flights are like you'll get there in a day, and I'm like, no.
Yeah, right. It's like hey, you can leave at 11 at night, get there in the morning, you're good. You know, yeah, it is a fun town, right? You know, I remember the first time I went to Drupal Camp Atlanta, people were like, "What are you doing here?" It's like, "Oh yeah, my friends," you know, and they were just like perplexed that I would travel so far, you know, to be there.
So the main event is starts on Tuesday, right? Monday is just the summits.
Monday is summits and training. Yeah,
It's
I'm going.
kickoff and everything. Yeah.
So I think there's only one free summit. I believe it's the community summit. Is that right?
Yeah.
The rest of them are 200, 250 or something like that.
Mhm.
I'm going to the healthcare summit because my colleague is helping to organize it.
So there's a few things and I always like to try to point this out. There's some things at DrupalCon that are recorded and some things that aren't. So one of the things, sessions, keynotes, of course, those are recorded, but birds of a feather aren't. So if you've never attended them, take a look at the boards, things like that. But more importantly, if there's one that you really want to go to it because they aren't recorded and you can contribute in that way. But there's also, you mentioned trainings. Those are really good, especially if you do need that training, but also contribution, I think is another thing that we always want to kind of promote a little bit is the ability to, well, as a group, address things in the issue queue, stuff like that. But yeah, it looks like there's a couple things on Monday, but mostly the summits, the trainings, contributions, and birds of a feather appear to be.
I always encourage people to go to the contribution room, and even if you're not going to do anything, just being there is so inspiring. I mean, just seeing all the people working together and just like the coordination, all these different people from, you know, with different skills working on different things and coordinating on, you know, something that you're gonna, you know, that's the next gonna be some big new feature of Drupal, and it's just fun to be a part of it. It's just a lot of energy. I find it very inspiring.
Yeah. And there's also I saw Mike Anello post something on LinkedIn about doing this Drupal CMS preview. So if there are marketing oriented people who just are kind of curious and they're planning on going, then that might be something that's worth taking a look at. It does cost money, as some of these things do, but still something worth at least mentioning.
I am curious about the birds of a feather, how well those are how well attended those are these days. I've done a couple of them in the past where I've proposed them and sort of led them, and you know, they're a half dozen people or something, you know, maybe 10 people, and that's fine because that's like kind of what they're supposed to be there, and they're not supposed to be presentations, they're really discussions. And you know, if you're leading it, you're leading a discussion, but it's really for people who have more sort of niche interests.
Yeah, absolutely. That they're usually roundtable sort of discussions, but they'll typically have someone that calls the birds of a feather group. They might have come up with the subject, so they may toe the line a little bit. But yeah, you're right. They are usually more group discussion format.
I was debating actually Chad, if you go to, I think, program, you can still submit a birds of a feather session.
Yeah,
You can just pick a slot and it's like, there's no need to be accepted or anything. You just like declare it that time for yourself.
yeah, and I think there's a cutoff for when they might actually print a board, kind of like a bingo card.
Yeah.
And then there will be blank slots in there for you to kind of pencil things in, which means if you want to know what's going on in the birds of a feather, the best thing to do is find the placard that has all of that. The biggest downside that I really observed is it's not very accessible. So people with visual impairment, stuff like that, that they may have some difficulties there. But yeah, you're right. I think it's good if you have a specific topic that you want to call in, definitely throw it on the calendar. In terms of the rest of the schedule, I can see that not only do they have birds of a feather pretty much on a lot of these days, but they also have a couple other things that might be of interest to some people, like the quiet room. It's like a prayer room, that sort of thing. So just keep an eye out for that if that's something that interests you. I think they were also talking about having something specific for families. So if you are bringing your kids or something like that, then that may be of interest too. I'm not sure exactly the details of it, but something that might be of interest.
One thing that I was thinking about with this DrupalCon is in the past, they've tended to be at convention centers, and I don't know how much of a convention center this is. It really is a hotel, right? With rooms, large rooms and that sort of thing, but it's not a convention center per se, right?
I mean, if it's at the Marriott,
And
has anybody been there?
Hyatt, right?
The Hyatt
Yeah, it's the
Regency.
Hyatt Regency.
Yeah, so it's like wedding rooms, you know.
Yeah.
Okay. So they may have a map that you can take a look at. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if there's something on here, but that might be something that might be helpful as well, especially if you're trying to figure out where things are. This is actually a good demonstration. It kind of breaks down all 4 days for you, the program,
Mhm.
and then trivia nights on the last night. I thought they used to do contributions as well on Fridays, but I guess that's kind of compacted into
I think that's going to be Thursday.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to see actually contributions happening throughout, which is also good.
Yep.
Okay, so watch this space. It could potentially change a little bit, but things to be aware of. Does anybody have any concerns about either the location, your travel, or trying to get the most out of DrupalCon?
I have a lot of concerns, but not related to Drupal specifically.
Just in general, troubled.
Especially given a couple of incidents lately down in the States.
Yeah. Well, I think there's validity to that though. Whether it's like what Andre was saying in terms of not having a visa, and that being a concern for travel, or just in general, traveling in and out of the country if you're not in the US, or if you are going through things like airplane security, and
Yeah.
it can be a bit invasive.
It's, I think, Paulus mean like, went from Canada but back to 51 state of USA. You mean this one?
Yeah. It's been a bit crazy lately.
So, Rick, you found this.
Yeah, just that should have like the big where the exhibit hall will be, presumably in the keynotes and that sort of thing.
It looks like a huge ballroom from that picture up top there. So
Yeah.
So they probably partition it, it looks. So I wonder if
yeah.
they'll have the whole thing or not.
Rick, did you find this on the DrupalCon website or just your own searching?
No, I just did a search for Hyatt Regency Atlanta map.
I'm putting this in our resources. That was a good find. Something to circulate for folks. And this might be good to link to from the actual DrupalCon site. Maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I'm gonna mention it.
And at least sometimes you can match these sort of things up to the actual schedule itself might tell you what room something's in, like this
Like the
Edgewood.
Edgewood. Yeah.
So what I would personally do a lot of times, and I don't take this as something that you should do, but it helped me. It was an accommodation for me because whenever I travel, I get really overwhelmed. It's a very stimulating experience. So what I would do ahead of time is I would just find the things that I'm most interested in and start adding these to my Google Calendar, just in a dedicated calendar just for DrupalCon, so I can turn it on and off and see the rest of my calendar unencumbered by the DrupalCon stuff. Even if two things are happening at the same time, I would still put them on the schedule just so I would know where it is. So for the location, things like that, I'd put that in the location field in the calendar thing. And then if there was something that I was definitely going to, I would switch it from free to busy so I could see what I intend to do. I don't know if that will help anybody else, but that's something that at least was an accommodation for me to, like, when I'm actually there, just pull up my phone and just very quickly find out what was the thing that I intended to go to. Any other thoughts about DrupalCon? DrupalCon as a concept, even?
Attendance, I mean, I feel like it was kind of like tense in Portland. And so now I feel like definitely more concerned.
Tense in what way? I just want to make sure that I understand.
Oh, the market, if the topic is market share, the market, and it's nice to see like phase 2 return. It was weird to not have phase 2 there. I mean, we've gone through a lot of different additional struggles since then, that are extremely material. And I think we have every reason to be concerned, regardless of whatever's going on, on other fronts. But those that impact, kind of like almost add insult to injury as far as in the current state we're in, I think, as far as the job market and, the players in this space, as far as those that are the employers, those that are the customers, really being succumbing to various different pressures is the best way I can put it.
Yeah, I think that's a valid concern, and one that I think has been simmering since really Drupal 8 for a lot of people. There was a big drop off into backdrop. There were a lot of folks who said, this is going the route of the enterprise, but I'm not enterprise. So there was a large market segment that we disturbed. I wouldn't say lost, but we disturbed. And then folks went either to backdrop or WordPress or other solutions. I still think that Drupal has a home in enterprise as an enterprise solution. So I don't think there's any doubt about that. But there's also a lot of stiff competition. If we rest on our laurels, that's always a concern. And since we're also talking about the idea of DrupalCon, one thing that I think we have all acknowledged and noticed is ageism or aging out as a market. So one of our first meetups that we had in this virtual group was specifically about the Inexperience Initiative, something that Carlos and Mike Anello have been working on. And I really want to kind of bring that back to the surface a little bit. If we all go the route of Fortran or COBOL, we're just going to retire as being the dinosaurs that know this technology, and it's not really growing for the younger market. So I'd love to see this market demand for Drupal really come from catering to the younger market as well. Not placating, but rather catering. Why would they be interested in Drupal compared to all other technology? Is it feeling like Fortran, or can we make it feel a little bit more glamorous and capable? I think Drupal CMS as a concept was a step in a positive direction there. But I don't think that's the only way to reach that group. I think it's through community. I think it's through education. I think it's through advocacy in education institutions, and also just being inviting in many different ways, whether it's to DrupalCon or meetups or everything in between. I said a lot.
And there's that, the ambassador program sort of speaks to that, I think, a bit, because it is sort of one of the stated goals, or maybe the main stated goal of that program at DrupalCon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes it's a matter of making sure that people are aware of those programs even existing, and make sure that we're targeting the right audience for that. I can't say whether or not that is or is not the case, but to your point, you brought it up, and I didn't even think of it.
Do we have a good sense of the decline in Drupal being that we saw last year at DrupalCon caused by economic decline or slowdown versus people leaving Drupal in general?
I do think it is people leaving Drupal, for sure. But then it was a tough year, just my own opinion. That was not the only reason, right? In other words, defection was not the only reason. But I think there were economic concerns. Personally, I feel it would be a blend.
I'd agree.
I did want to pile on with Chad about the IXP initiative. I think it's really cool, and we're going to help Carlos out with that as well. Going to meet with him this week to talk about that and see what we can, continue to put together. But more so to your point, how do you appeal, right, to the new audience, to the new user groups? And right, that's not only the developer community, but also, again, that the clients, because they don't have jobs without them. And so, like, how do you use this, which I agree with you, Chad. I think there's a firm reasoning technically that this will survive and live on. But I also think that a lot of the different things we see out there, like if we were to take LinkedIn Chatter, right, and look at that, where Drupal CMS step in the right direction, is it an elegant, simplistic, headless solution that then can stand up next to modern JavaScript implementations? No. So honestly, I'm going to take a second and just make a plug for Jay Calicott and his project Drupal X, which we're also supporting, and we'll have him at DrupalCon at our booth, and we're going to do a little event with him. But just making Drupal simple and incredibly modern, right? At least in step with AI and whatever it's being used for, not just content, but actually building with it. I think that's where you're going to find true time accelerators, which are actually appealing. Beyond, we've got ChatGPT in the content window. That's great, right? But at the rate this all moves, it's got to be better than that. So at least I like seeing people making those attempts and not waiting, for the official word or internal group, inner circle to make it happen or whatever, and just doing it, and so that is exciting to me. And I think that's how it's going to work, as far as like appealing to the younger community and appealing to, the agency community that needs, excellent tools and to be able to deliver better, faster, smarter, if you will, and the customers that benefit from that.
Is anyone involved in sales? I'm curious what people are hearing as far as like, sorry, we didn't go with you in Drupal. We went with this and something else.
Yeah, I can tell you from my experience, a lot of times the contenders for Drupal are things like the Adobe Experience Manager or Sitecore. It depends on the type of industry it's in, like if it's government versus e-commerce versus, really the solutions start to fan in one direction or another. WordPress is still a very prevalent competitor, regardless of the past year's drama. But you brought that up for a reason, Andrew. Why?
Well, I feel like that's where the answers are. Like that's where the pivot point is of the decision on whether to use Drupal or not, is the people who are making the decision and spending the money. So I'm
totally agree.
The first two you listed are, as far as I know, more enterprisey.
Yeah.
So I could kind of imagine them sort of just going with the defaults, and especially the AEM and I think Sitecore too. Maybe like if they already had an IT vendor, this might be part of the package or something.
I
Yeah.
think there are general tiers though. Like a lot of times the enterprise side of things get a lot of pre-baked solutions as major competitors because they're really turnkey and they're guaranteed to a certain extent versus Drupal, WordPress, and other similar sort of systems. And then you drop down to lower tiers, then you're competing with WordPress or even Wix and Squarespace.
And
I
then you
think on
can
the
get more into
enterprise
like
side,
developer
sorry.
decisions. I was just gonna say you're getting into like developers making the decisions on what they want to work with.
That isn't what happens though.
Oh.
You know, what happens is a stakeholder, and they're often, especially with those competitors involved, you know, some kind of either digital strategy nepotism or actual nepotism, where it's like, yeah, my brother-in-law's over at SVP at, you know, Adobe, we're gonna go with AEM. You know, I've seen that over, you know, 10 years. But I would say I agree with Chad's point too. You know, I think Chad said this. Forgive me if it was you, Andrew. But the recipes, right? This is like, hey, you know, this is what you got. And so if you bring a recipe and a sales team to a fast-moving organization, rather than you can make anything you want,
It's too
big
open.
difference.
Yeah,
It's too open.
you have to be very specific and prescriptive a lot of times for executives and decision makers. I'd agree with that in sales, at least in the sales cycle. But
Well, I love the recipes initiative personally. I feel that's one of our
it,
biggest hopes.
it does help. Well, it helps to come in with a level of confidence and proof to back that confidence up in the sales side of things. But you're dealing with a different audience in the sales side of things. So let's kind of capture this for a second. Drupal's market demand isn't one audience, it's multiple audiences. You have the people who implement the technology, so production, and people that kind of circle around that, designers and testers and things like that. The
Content
support
management.
makes it happen. But then separately, you have the people that are funding those things. So that leans a little bit more in the direction of what Chris is talking about with major stakeholders, solutions architects who may have a developer and technical background, and they typically do, but they're leaning more towards the strategic side of things. That's something that I've done for many years. And I can tell you, if I'm given a challenge, sometimes I say problems are negative. Challenge is the optimistic way of saying that. So if I'm given a challenge like, okay, this government website is ancient on .NET Nuke, bring us to something modern, I'm not focused on their level of interest in something like Drupal. I'm first and foremost interested in, well, what are you trying to do? What do you currently have? What do you like about what you have? What don't you like about what you have? Let's start with that. And if Drupal is a good fit for that, Drupal is going to be something that I'm going to strongly recommend. But I think this brings our conversation about Drupal's market demand back to those two major points, which is who's paying for it and why would they be interested in Drupal? And I think that's where Drupal CMS may appeal a little bit more to them. But separately is this audience, let's just call them the younger developers and everyone that kind of surrounds that. Why would they be interested in Drupal versus something a little sexier? Like if I want to play around with a new technology, Drupal is not the first thing that's going to come to mind if I'm a new developer. But how could we change that?
I think one of the barriers is PHP.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Like JavaScript took off. That's, you know, where people are learning to code in boot camps and where a lot of like the web traction has gone. We've stuck it out with PHP, and I think PHP has evolved, and I really respect where it is today. On Reddit, I think there's a lot of the people that are kind of swinging the pendulum back to PHP a little bit. Laravel gets a lot of traction. So, and in WordPress, of course. And between WordPress, Laravel, and Drupal, Laravel is more of like a total backend thing, more comparable to Symfony. Drupal sort of in between WordPress and Laravel, where it's got a great backend framework, but also has a front-end UI for configuring stuff. WordPress, I feel like that's that's where we should be doing the land grab right now, where I feel like they're headless. They don't have a great community organization structure. It's just crazy over there right now. And I think the reasons why people use WordPress are what we are trying to build with not so much Drupal CMS, but more Experience Builder coming out later this year.
Yeah.
think
I actually had an interesting occurrence this week where I got in a meeting with like Jay Calicott and another one of our community members. And that individual wanted to, they're working for a mid-sized company. They're kind of like a 6-year-old startup or something like that. And one of our, community agencies here in our ecosystem convinced them that WordPress would be the way to go. And so they converted and went to WordPress. And then they hired a Drupal developer, right? Basically to lead their technology. And when he got in there to see it, he could see that it was basically, I'm not as technical as I used to be, but it was basically all serialized data, right? So they don't really have a field concept unless that's actually imposed, right? And so he was like, this is like a Messerschmitt. This is ridiculous. Like, how can we possibly do anything with this? So essentially, it was about making WordPress Drupal, right? And I've seen that before as well at like the enterprise level where same thing, like the Discovery Channel. Oh, yeah, well, use WordPress. Like by the time they were done with it, it wasn't WordPress anymore. But back to your point, Andrew, yeah, the advances with PHP, it's the speeds we've seen, in the past year, I'd say, and even couple, consistent improvement, let's say. And, honestly, I would interject as well that yes, the JavaScript, and that was what I was saying off the bat as well. But some of the stuff that I've seen out there, that's gaining incredible traction, the no-low code stuff, like over the Power Apps and this other thing, Mendix, that was bought by Siemens. It's Java and React on top of SQL. So once again, SQL. So that structure is very strong and going nowhere. And I think it's about, right, like having the right components on top, going with the what I like to say, the tailwinds, which would definitely be React, and trying to again bring those folks that are already interested and show them, right, like you were saying, Chad, how they are going to think about this, how they are going to hear about it. Well, it's 78 or 82% of the internet is running on this, so that's why you should. And, yes, maybe we can do better to make it, sexier and unified, essentially.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm seeing in the front end frameworks is like if you're going to build a React app, it only provides the front end framework. Like there's Next, which is a back end. It's like a full stack framework, but it's not a framework in the sense that Drupal is a backend framework and supports users and content and like all the things that you need to do on a website, like the business logic side.
That's another huge strength I find personally: user management, permissions, roles, etc.
And also by doing it, we're all doing it the same way with the same core. So we're all sharing the same issue queue and refining things. Whereas in the React space, there's React, Vue, Angular, a bunch of others. And like there's a lot of good solutions out there, but there isn't the same like community.
I think where Drupal struggles is that we've also chosen some technologies which may voice a controversial opinion, like JSON API, that nobody uses out there. Whereas almost every framework I see supports GraphQL to an extent or exposes their data through GraphQL. So there's the GraphQL module that gives Drupal GraphQL capabilities, but then you have to build your own schema, and that needs its own coding capabilities as well. So I feel like our choices also limit our adoption quite a bit, even though they are made with well intentions when those choices were made. But when the market focuses on another technology and we've chosen another, then it's becoming a bit of an issue.
It's a good point. I was kind of thinking like, what would it take for Drupal to become something like an open source Firebase? We obviously would have to have a really good API system, but I don't understand myself like why it's bad.
Not necessarily bad, it's just it's not very widely adopted.
Yeah, I agree with you, Andrew. I mean, I know how you're feeling. Like I just built our new website with Drupal 10, and other than a few here things, whatever, for that, I mean, it's fantastic. It's great. It's reliable. It's fast. It's you don't need Drupal CMS necessarily if you had, but a great setup, if you will, right? Meaning that again, I think of it as a recipe with a UI right now. So
Well,
that's awesome.
I like to think of technical solutions as kind of on a spectrum. You've got easy and you've got powerful. And
Mhm.
and Drupal tends to lean much more in the powerful direction, WordPress a little bit more in the easy. And you can do things to each of them to make them more easy or to make them more powerful. But I think it returns back to a couple of ideas. One is, how long does it take someone who's even remotely interested in using Drupal to even understand how to use Drupal? That is a very big mountain. And if I said, you know what, I just need a solution for XYZ. If the solution that I'm looking for is something that's really simple right now, of course I'm going to go Squarespace, Wix, maybe WordPress for something really simple. But I think the solutions architect in me always remembers it's not just about what you need to do today, it's about what you need to do a year from now, maybe 2 years from now. And you need to be a little bit of a futurist with your user base and with your stakeholders to try to realize a version of what that might be. So that way, the economy of scale, the total cost of ownership for that solution can be quite realized. And that's a very boring conversation for stakeholders or, the developer looking for the sexy new thing. But I think there's ways that we can make Drupal sexy for both the, for lack of a better word, fundraisers, the people paying for it, and the people who are interested in using it. I was a Drupal developer up to Drupal 7, and I kind of stopped because I got into sales, solutions architecture, design, things like that. I love that side of things, and it's really pleasant for me, and I like staying there. But I realized I should probably learn Drupal 10 development just so I can really wrap my head around this. And Mike Anello and I did a thing early last year where I refreshed my skills, and that was great. But the same problem that kept me from learning Drupal 8 still exists. It is, how do I set up a local dev environment? How do I go through just even getting Drupal up and running so that I can configure it and make changes? That investment is really large, and there's no ABC guide that explains exactly how to do that to a would-be brand new Drupal developer. So I feel like if we can break through that barrier of here's the quick start guide, so you can set up your dev environment and get to coding to make this your own. I mean, that was the joy of Drupal when I first started. I could just spin it up on a local LAMP stack, and I at least could understand that. I mean, I have lots of Linux experience, so maybe my barrier for entry is a little bit lower from other people, but I could also one-click install Drupal on some server environments, and that at least got me something up and running that I could tinker with. It's the hello world application that we really need for Drupal to make someone feel like they can use this. And I feel like the more complex Drupal gets, the more enterprise it gets, the farther from that it gets. That's my feeling, though.
I agree with you, Chad. First time I used it, I was GoDaddy. It was like spin this up and use it and make something with it. And we don't, that's not serious, right? But it went a long, long way, and when you think about it, messing around with this and that. And I mean, hey, we all, I've been a professional as well, in that realm, and know that's what I needed to do. And that's great. But on the other hand, it would be a hell of a lot easier. And then, there are people out there with entire businesses based around cloud desktops. And, supposedly, not supposedly, in reality, this is the better way, right? So why don't we do that? Right. And so I like to, that's why I like, hanging out with Salim and Dev Panel and the Cloud Desktop and Drupal Forge thing and what he's doing with that, because that, he's been trying to push that on me for a long, long time, like, help me sell this. And I'm like, I don't know what I can do with that really exactly, but I believe in it and I love it. And, how do we, as the community, leverage something like that? He's got it all set up. He's giving it to the community as Drupal Forge. You know what I mean? So like, take it further and promote that so that it answers that question for, the new user, and then makes it, something they can carry forward for, I'm told it's incredibly economical, basically, the cloud desktop stuff. So like, if somebody has to pay for it, it's not going to be much.
Right on. No.
I'm hoping that the homepage for Drupal CMS has clear instructions for a newbie to install it, because that's a huge miss if it doesn't.
No, it's like DDEV dependent. I mean, you got to get local. You got to get, and people have come out with criticism on it, on that. I mean, I'm not setting it. I don't need to set that up necessarily, but
I think we encountered those issues on one of the last meetups when we were trying to set up Drupal CMS live, and we were asked for background information, fill out this marketing form, and disable ad blockers or whatnot. I can only speak for myself, but that quickly make me lose interest in trying to install Drupal CMS.
I hope it's changed, but about a month ago, right after the summit, I guess, Chad, so whenever that was, a couple months ago, I was like, oh yeah, I better like get up, I gotta like see what this is, I mean, I haven't really checked it out or had time. So I go and I try to demo it, especially coming after the demo of Drupal Forge. And I joke, but it was true. Like, I started that demo up and, she's spinning, and I'm talking, it was like 9 minutes. I went to the kitchen, closed the laptop, opened it back up, and, it had finished. And I was like, oh yeah. So, but that wasn't our experience with Drupal Forge, based on whatever the architecture and, what's behind the curtain there.
It's possible that project browser and recipes might help with that, like, setup experience. Like, once you get it installed, there should be some like pre-made solutions for that are like an example of the kind of site that you want to work on.
I think there is some activity in that area, that I agree, hopefully in the next, year, several months a year, we'll see more solidification.
I think that fits Drupal Forge. Like, I imagined, like, if you wanted to make an application that was like it was built in Drupal, but you're selling it as like a SaaS service, that something like Drupal Forge might work. That'd be sort of if they're cloning their own instance. But yeah,
that's actually, I mean, like, you can just think of it as like quick install platform effectively. I mean, you couldn't use Drupal Forge for that, but you could use the technology that is providing the functionality for Drupal Forge for that.
That makes sense, because I can imagine sort of like you if you like kind of put together a base kit that you want to use across multiple sites, then you have clients that are sort of using that same like distribution install profile.
And I see Ryan join the call, but to take Ryan's words, like at the summit, like that would be the enterprise version of Drupal Forge, which is actually Dev Panel, and all that comes with it. The cloud desktop stuff and quick spin up. And yes, if you had, a substantial client that had various different, recipes, whatever these distributions, if we used to call them, Pfizer in the old days.
I'm definitely walking in halfway into this, but the white label version of it, which I've beta tested. I think my relationship with the project is that I've beta tested it, but you can take whatever code that you want, turn it into a Git repo, and they have a way to let you turn that into one of those distributions. You could do it privately or you could do it publicly. So they do, I think, have some clients that, you know, they want to do like the old Acquia Gardens model where they want to have 35 of these sites or something. So their backend allows you to create like a white label, you know, my agency dot Drupal Forge hosting solution thing. I guess dev panel technically.
Yeah.
So that's all possible if you want to go there. I didn't know what the rest of the context for the conversation is, but that's what I know.
Oh, we were talking about the barrier of local development setup to, you know, a new Drupal user coming to the fold and, you know, either being embraced or discouraged. I'd say, Chad, was that fair?
Yeah. I mean, the overall discussion is Drupal's market share or rather market demand. Like, why would somebody want to use Drupal? And this is a question of audience as well. Like, either it's I'm a developer, why would I choose to learn Drupal? Or I'm someone that provides funding for a project, why would Drupal be appropriate for my project? And those are very different answers as to how you attract them. But I think a lot of this comes back to the Drupal community trying to pivot and adjust as we did, you know, in the past year by coming up with Drupal CMS and continuing to work on it. I did take a look at the documents and I posted a link in our chat here for Drupal CMS. It looks like it's heading in a positive direction. I'm trying to look at it through the lens of, again, those two audiences. I'm a would-be developer, maybe just getting my start off with some of the basics. Maybe I know enough to do some web development with HTML, JavaScript, CSS, maybe something like PHP or Python. But why would Drupal be interesting to me? And I think these documents address one of the concerns that we raised earlier, which is how do I even install it to start tinkering with it? It seems to go a little bit of a distance with you can use a trial, and it looks like Acquia has one, looks like Drupal Forge has one. So this is good. There's options, but also how do I start it up on DDEV? And then later on, how do I move it to a hosting environment? Those are good. Somebody's baby stepping them through the kind of natural process of, well, it doesn't cost anything to do it locally. Maybe it does through some sort of a trial, maybe it doesn't. But I think anytime, as Pavlos said about our last meetup, anytime somebody's putting in their email address or other information into a form to try something, they're highly likely not to do that. They're more likely to move on to the next thing. Or if Drupal really has to be of interest to you, how can we lower that barrier? How can we make it at least as frustrating as any other technology? Less frustrating.
Yeah, that was another big importance for Salim and Drupal Forge is, you know, totally anonymous.
Yeah. That's why I like the way I really like the way Drupal Forge did it. I can just click the button and it spins up and I don't need to sign up for anything. I don't need to receive marketing emails about anything. And that's exactly how I thought the Drupal CMS trial experience would work on Drupal.org. So I was very frustrated to see the whole marketing.
Well, he's trying to put pressure on the DA to I forget what it's called. What is it? Simple test me, or I don't know what the framework is today to do the demo, but simply test me. You know, as I described that experience, but he's trying to put pressure on them to replace that with this. So we'll see.
The way Drupal Forge did it was exactly how I thought the whole thing would work.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, I clicked this button on a Drupal Forge 10 minutes ago and still waiting.
So it's a capacity thing.
For Drupal CMS?
Yeah, just run Drupal CMS. Run.
That's the one you chose as the startup?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, after I told my little anecdote, Salim was like, yeah, that one would actually take a little longer.
And another one, what I would like to mention, it's about documentation. Do you mind if I share some screen and can
Yeah, you should be able to now.
explained. Yeah. Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Yeah.
There it is. Yep, we got it.
Moment, yeah. I moved to another display. I can. Okay. Yeah. For example, you can see this is our documentation, right, for Drupal CMS. And I think you will be agree if I tell you that it's documentation not for common user. This is documentation for Drupal developer, for more developers, people than for common user, for general user. This one, I think it's not the best, but a better example of documentation for common user because it's pretty straightforward and a lot of picture for me, and it's only take like, I don't know, 3 lines of code, and for example, this is example for night watch can be run. And here, for example, I entered on this site first time and I tried to find some documentation how I should run Drupal for 3 minutes. I start looking and yeah, until I find something, it's take so much time. Finally, I decide this just close. This is documentation, go to WordPress and that's it. I think first of all, we should just improve our documentation page, make it more for common people, not for developers, because this is documentation for developers, not for basic for basic peoples, not for general people.
I think people have more problems installing DDEV than they do in what like after DDEV is installed and then getting Drupal up and running.
Yeah, I think yeah, but all time we are speaking about how we can attend, how we can invite new people, how we can expand our community. But we have like it's not a global, maybe it's some kind of a structure issue. Our documentation. We go to this documentation, we have a look on this documentation, and yeah, I understood. For me, simply that just close this page, and because it's too hard to find how we can just install, how we can deploy DDEV and press 3 buttons and insert 2 commands for DDEV for deploy.
Usability
Kind of,
you
yeah.
illustrated there. A lot of times when we want to test things, we say, here's a task I want you to do, and I want you to go onto this web page and try to complete this task. And if somebody can't complete it, that's a failure. Or if it takes too many steps, that's also a form of a failure. And I think what you're illustrating with the night watch is you go to the page and you can just do it. It's right there.
Yeah.
It's a bit buried.
There is a difference in complexity though, because Nightwatch doesn't need you to have like if you don't have environment requirements there, you don't need to have a database set up, you don't need a web server. It's all in NPM. So it's more like you're comparing NPM with Composer. Because the instructions are just like installing, like you already have NPM installed. If you're going from how do I install NPM on my system that doesn't already have it, then that would be equivalent to how do I set up DDEV and Drupal. I'm not saying you're wrong about the documentation being a mess. I'm just saying like we have a harder problem to solve that we not only have to orient between like the local installation and your options for doing that, but also like orient them around, oh, there's Drupal Forge, there's Drupal dev panel. Like it is complex conceptually where the starting point is.
I think the problem, because I was poking around the Drupal, I don't go to the homepage very often, and everything points you to try Drupal CMS for that trial where you put your email and everything in. And it isn't until like several clicks in that you can actually find out what you're supposed to do to install it locally on your machine. Like it takes a while to actually get there, which is kind of annoying, but
Especially because like this was the whole stated point of why we created this in the first place, was to make it easy, and then like
yeah.
kind of fell short on the instructions part.
Like, and it could be super simple. You've got a get started button that says try Drupal CMS, try hosting. Add another link there that says, start developing, that takes you to the download page to install it on your machine. It's kind of odd that it just points, it just sends you in circles to the trial thing. But in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's some usability hurdles there. I wanted to take a little bit of a step sideways though, and talk a little bit about, again, if we're talking about Drupal's market demand, what is eating Drupal's market demand. But before we do, I did want to mention that Ryan has a DrupalCon ticket. Does somebody need a DrupalCon ticket?
To sell?
To
understand.
So Drupal Association says if a certain number of people associate themselves with your local meetup, which in our case is Pacific Northwest Drupal Meetup, they say, would you like to sponsor someone to go to DrupalCon? And we are saying, does anybody here know of someone that would love to go to DrupalCon, has a way to get to Atlanta, but would like to save $1,000? And if you don't know right now, you can get on our Slack channel and you could probably drop it in there.
Yeah. Well, I know Nora was supposed to be here tonight. I was going to check on her today to see if she had a ticket. And that was one thing I'd recommend. I would check on personally.
All right.
Way to be organized, Ryan.
Thank you for this sponsored commercial break by Ryan Price. Back to our topic though, about Drupal's market demand. Obviously, it's not just about our personal jobs and our personal interest and the Drupal community. I think it's a project that started, 24 years ago, that has demonstrated its ability to produce some very complicated, structured websites. And I don't think anybody would be on this call if you didn't think that it still has a great degree of capability in that space as a solution. But trying to flip this around on the other side, what other things are kind of eating Drupal's lunch?
Well, like the whole reason why JavaScript has come up is because of the whole ability to be more interactive on the front end.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of PHP frameworks like Laravel and Drupal are playing catch up there. I think there is a lot of interesting development with technologies like HTMX, and there were like 3 different ones I was looking at recently. Inertia.js. They're all ones that are sort of, you augment in your like backend templates. You can use additional attributes that are like sort of activated through these front end libraries. So it's almost like you're doing front end dynamic stuff all in the back end. So it's a little more like you're kind of speaking one language and not leaving the box, but still getting the same capabilities, because it's all web technologies that the JavaScript stuff is tapping into.
Okay. Would you say that those are, we were talking about the sexy factor, but do you think that those are also faster to spin up as solutions or more capable as solutions?
No.
Okay.
No, I think it's all hype. I think that's like the primary. It's like, I think people are like, oh, everyone uses React, so I have to use React. And now that they're there, they're like, oh, I guess I have to select a database now and pick my ORM. And like, okay, you could have built your own thing all along, but we wanted to do one stack for the sake of making it modular and sharing code. And like, you can do that with, hey, there's a bunch of stuff available for the React stuff, but it seems like a far more fragmented ecosystem. Like when I'm talking about PHP, I'm like, it's you're probably using Laravel. You might be using WordPress or Drupal, but that eats up most of what people are doing in PHP. Plus all the other stuff.
I wanted to say that as far as on the hype side of things, I was until like in planning for this new website, I was like, well, I don't have to use Drupal, right? So I explored some other things, and I mean, shame, shame, shame. But inevitably, I looked at Strappy, I looked at Ghost. I wanted to be educated on, at least some open source node based CMS products, and cloud and all, Strappy was not, it's fairly well adopted, and it wound up being basically a node driven paragraphs. At most it had paragraphs set up, and that was the way it worked. And initially, right, when you're testing a product, like, are you feeling good about it or are you frustrated? And I mean, I was fairly frustrated. So I was like, I don't know if this is passing the test. I mean, I'm sure maybe many fine people like it. Ghost, I didn't get that much further with, just from a time perspective. But, I was more so philosophically convinced by then that I wanted to go with Drupal and Tome, which we're using now. And it's cool. I mean, whatever. I wasn't really up to speed on the whole. Somehow I wasn't thinking back to my days as an HTML developer, and that I needed to deal with the forms separately. So right now we point it back to the Drupal site, but we'll get that fixed up real quick. So yeah, I mean, it works just great, and if you don't need that rich interaction, that something like React would create, it's a hell of a lot cheaper and faster, and so on. And I think incredibly mature, from a page builder perspective and a user management perspective. So it I was just reading that Reddit post that Kelly put in there, and it was like, some of the comments are so funny about Drupal, well, how could anything, use, you save one field and it breaks the site, or something like that. But I mean, we didn't have a hell of a lot of that until, of course, launch, where there was the first, WSOD, and I was like, whatever you did yesterday, roll that back now, because I don't want to be seeing this on this simple ass little website project. You're killing me here, Anyway, agree.
Looks like Kelly may have left as well as Ryan. I want to jump back to the hype idea, though. I think there was a lot of hype around Drupal. Let's just back it up 10 years ago. I mean, there was a tremendous amount of hype in our tech industry. And I want to say, I wonder what would get that back. But I think a lot of that comes with how agencies tend to hype, as well as how it stacks up to solutions for, again, we keep coming back to the who's paying for this stuff. Why would they be interested in Drupal versus other solutions? And I think part of the hype there is also getting in front of their eyes and making sure that they understand that Drupal is still a highly competitive solution, very capable of solving a lot of needs for, various, not just enterprise technology solutions, but others.
I think a lot of we definitely got more enterprise.
Mhm.
So that's sort of a hard sell to the new dev. I think that is kind of looking for more like popular experience.
Yeah.
And I think the more like accessible projects, think about like where you might get your first real experience. Like creating a site as a volunteer for something around you, like a group that you're a part of or something, or an event site. So you may not be reaching for the most complex thing. But if Drupal lets you, it scales down. Like you just need to create content on a couple of pages with a menu. It works totally fine for that.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Like, it might just be like what people are discussing, like around the new developers when they go to look for a tool.
You know, Chad, to your point though, like 10 years, right?
Yeah.
We'll never get that back. We'll never get that back. Never. And I'm the biggest optimist around. The reason I feel is because if you think about 10 years ago, we had a state, at least in the United States here, we had a state where government was still, you know, Dreamweaver world. And they needed something structured and database driven so bad that it was coming out, you know, it was going out of style. It was just absolutely unbelievable. If somebody didn't do something soon, even the cheapest of them, right? And still, right, in our country, the cheaper states, if you will, some of them are still kind of coming, you know, figuring that out 10 years later. However, that's the minority. And so that, along with the fact that, you know, 10 years ago, you had that, you know, spike in commercial, right, where media and pharma were really, they were like, yeah, this is cool rapid development tool, you know, like we can do with this, you know. But I remember, and, you know, maybe Rick can shed some light on this with his competitive landscape. But I remember when I was at Accenture and, like, you know, the enterprise didn't want to hear anything about it. They were done with PHP, and, you know, it was we're going to build it with Node from the ground up with something great on top. The performance is better, everything's better, you know, the talent pool, et cetera, you know, and all of that was kind of like, it was almost like we got, you know, to that hill and that level of popularity and adoption, you know, and then Node and JavaScript solutions just kind of came out and, you know, kicked it in the tire, in the gut a lot. So I think there still are customers, you know, that need that more simplistic, accessible, financially solution, and it's a fantastic tool for that. But we'll never get to the point where, you know, it had the density that I think it had then. You know, personally,
I think
that'd be hard.
I think that's a good perspective. On one hand, I like to think to myself, why would anyone new in dev or IT seek out learning Microsoft Exchange? It's not something that's really sexy, but it's absolutely everywhere. It's just not glamorous, but it's still prevalent. And it doesn't even require any hype. It's just so pervasive. And I think Drupal has become very pervasive, but people are also replacing it with things that they feel are faster to spin up, faster to manage, maybe just easier to wrap our heads around. So it seems like simple is becoming the way to go. And because there was such this lean into power and complexity with Drupal and its evolution over the past 2 years, it's kind of started working on the solution that it already was and making it more so that, as opposed to thinking of, well, all of these other things are starting to gain greater market share. But I also want to pivot towards something else that I think we can all observe is, you know, 10 years plus ago, there weren't nearly as many SaaS solutions. You know, these turnkey solutions that can work. If I want to spin up, you know, an Atlassian product and have Confluence for a lot of my internal documents, why would I build a Drupal site for that when I can just pay my license and move on with life? It's a known budgetary item. So a lot of government institutions may be shifting off to more things in the cloud. Yes, it's on a FedRAMP server. Like, it checks all of the boxes that I'm supposed to check with my IT department. So why would I bother building something custom with Drupal? And I think that's
Off
another
the shelf, baby. You know what I mean? It's one of the favorite words of government.
And people have built things like that with Drupal, you know, and I think that for a long time was the Drupal distribution model. And I think recipes may help fill in some of that space, but we're kind of meeting the moving train. It's already been in motion for a while now. I don't know. I'm kind of just thinking off the cuff here, but wondering if this sparks any ideas for us regaining some of that market share.
I'm doing get a place that is all in on Drupal, and they're consolidating other platforms into Drupal.
I like Pablo's comment, you know, and I think it comes back to the idea that Jay is working on, you know, because I was talking with him the other day, Calicut, and he was just like, you know, like, at first, how I got into all this, what I'm doing is, like, you know, I like hated headless and I thought it sucked, and I was just like, but then I actually got into it because, I wanted to create something. I wanted to, understand why it sucked. And so he got into it and he realized, like, these problems can be fixed, but it's going to take some doing. In doing that, let's devote ourselves, he wanted to devote himself to that mission, right? To make not only the AI, because his thing has two, where it's actually native Drupal and, the AI, he has an AI landing page builder going in there. But then he's got headless, right? And like, headless easy, if you will, whatever. And, to make, that's his goal, is to make Drupal headless easy. And I feel like Pavlos's point captures, what's on the minds of, the up and coming, and, they're not even up and coming. They've been here for a long time, right? Like the dominant front end, which, as Andrew was saying, rock and roll. I mean, a lot of things are happening on the front end, so it's a matter of like, how do we use the strengths of Drupal? And I think there are people that have been talking about this for a while, user management, SQL, its maturity, the workhorse that it is. And, and yes, modernize the API framework, because it's certainly, nothing we're a stranger to. It just, I think, needs to be updated. But once that's done, I mean, it's a fabulous utility, and, you should be able to, and we could, as Andrew's saying, like bring other platforms in, make it simple to, spin up, what people believe is the latest and greatest, and make that, something that can be changeable, as quickly as the market does.
I read a interesting. I can't cite the source, so don't ask me. I read an interesting thing a while back about, to get somebody to change from one thing to another, like Microsoft Office to Google Apps, something like that. You have to be 30% or more into the features that they're looking for to even convince them that it's worth relearning something. And I feel like if we're talking about whether it's Drupal or React or whatever solution we're talking about, if we're going to attract people, it has to really go above and beyond as a solution, solve problems that are cheaper, faster, easier to understand, easier to educate. And that's a tall order for any technology. Kind of wrapping that a little bit back to Andrew, what you were saying. You said Cigna is all in on Drupal. Is it because this is more of a historic thing, or is it because they've kind of just been recently doubling down on that as a solution?
I don't know like the history of the decision, but they've merged multiple other like health insurance providers into one big conglomerate. So this is like different teams coming together, and at some point they must have decided to go with Drupal versus like I think Sitecore is their other stack.
Yeah, we see that a lot. That and AEM and
I guess that's where I'm having a bit of an issue with the whole thing, where we're thinking of we need to get people to change. And I'm like, well, don't do that. Don't force them to change. Like, because Drupal has a lot of systems that are great. And the only thing that, in my opinion, at least, is lacking its API capabilities. So people are not forced to change if they have a front end that they've already built and they just need a backend system. Give them an API that they can hook into so that at least they can preserve some of what they have. Because if I have a team of front end developers, I don't want to get rid of them just to try and hire a team of Drupal developers that I may or may not find, because Drupal developers are scarce. I already have my team of front-end developers. I just need a backend system that will enable them to do their job. And I guess I'm having an issue with the whole force people or get people to change. And I'm like, let people use the tools that they want to be using. Just give them the APIs they need to do what they need to do.
Well, a big part of what we're working on is integration between design systems and like a consistent design across multiple properties that is all editable and developable in a consistent way. So like layout builder is a big win, and like SDC. And we're like kind of at the edges of like, that's the thing that you would want to be easy in a CMS. So we're kind of experimenting with the tooling and the techniques. And I think there's a lot more that's coming with like experience builder.
What's SEC? Andrew?
SDC.
SDC,
Yeah,
single directory components.
SDC. Oh, well, the single directory component. Yeah.
I've been experimenting a lot lately with UI patterns and UI suite. It's like a whole collection of modules that will integrate components with the Drupal UI. So you can like create a component and then in the display manager for an entity, like configure fields to populate the props and slots and stuff. But yeah, I mean, to your point, Pablo, is like, it's been kind of rough because like the people that aren't Drupal devs have been kind of thrown into it, and like the theory is that they're front-end devs, they can do SDC components, but the reality is there does need to be a lot of consideration for how you structure things.
Yeah.
And one of the headaches I'm running into now is that they're kind of building things around what they see in the design system and Figma, and the designers even have their own storybook instance. But the components don't directly map into the Drupal structures. So we're having to like recreate the storybook in a Drupal version that's rendering SDC components. And then that doesn't actually make it easy to get into Drupal because you still have to do the integration work. So I don't know, either they haven't really attained what they were going for, or they haven't really thought about how this should all fit together in a more seamless way. And then we're like halfway through this. I came on kind of recently, and then some decision came down from the top, like, we're going to start using web components. And it's like, okay, well, how? Is there a plan? Or just going to figure this out once that's been decided?
You just have willing and desire. Yeah, let's start use it. Yeah.
It's quite the monolith of features that Drupal has to maintain, though, and I think that's the fat ship turning slowly sort of problem. Sometimes is there's so many interests, but there is one thing that I learned very early in my career that I think may resonate, and this might also fly in the face of what Pavlov said earlier. Try to put this together. If you create custom solutions anywhere, whether it's in IT or as a developer, and nobody else knows that solution but you, then education is the biggest challenge. Now, if it's a standardized thing, like, and going back to Microsoft Exchange, I started my career in Microsoft. That's why I pick on it sometimes. If you have an IT department that adopts Microsoft Exchange, you could go hire somebody tomorrow to replace them if something bad happens to them. As a company, you're very interested in making sure that your human resources are scalable and to an extent replaceable. And I say that as someone that is highly about human preservation and security, but I also have to understand that if you're picking a technology on purpose, if you're picking a solution on purpose, you don't want to pick something so bespoke that only one person knows it. That is a recipe for disaster. So I think as Drupal is concerned, and Andrew, you touched on this a little bit earlier, there's a lot, if you compare it to WordPress and other solutions, there's a lot that has been highly standardized. It's a complex set of things, but if you point in any one direction at things in Drupal core or things in community components, modules, plugins, whatnot, a lot of that uses, the buzzword is industry best practices, but they're really just things that are, standard syntax or things that are highly secure and tested. I think there's something to be said about that when it comes to Drupal. So Pavlos, the thing that kind of flies in the face of what you said is it's hard to find a Drupal developer. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. Chris would know. I mean, you hire people.
That was a good one, but no, it's definitely not hard to find a Drupal developer. I got like 14 out in my yard, you know, as well as a few more out in the woods. No doubt. So no, but I hear you, Pavlos. You know what I mean? Like, actually, what resonated with me when he said that was the sad part, and let's connect that back to the 10 years, you know, we've been using as a bit of an object this evening. And the fact that for various reasons, again, back to Pavlos's comments, you know, and people coming on and looking at Twig, oh, well, this is the new revolution. Like, no, you know, and so on. And so, you know, just I think the reality is that we have chased some people away for a number of different reasons, right? And I don't disagree with anything that you said, Chad, as far as the maturity and the standardization and best practices and all that stuff, you know. I mean, it's a wonderful, passionate, you know, complex web. But yeah, you know, I mean, look at the people that, you know, we talk about the community, right, that it's appealing to, right? And the disparity between the stakeholder and the producer, right, the maker. And those folks have very particular ideas one way or another, competing factions, et cetera. And that makes, you know, that's decision by community. By committee, that's very difficult in any context, you know. So I think we have that challenge along with many others, and people are being born and coming into the workforce and innovating, as you said, right? So, I mean, Andrew just mentioned 2 or 3 different technologies I never heard of that I need to go, you know, and that's why I come here for this kind of stuff, you know what I mean? So that's life today.
Yeah, one of the people I don't hear from in this whole conversation are the content authors. So I feel like the ones who are like actually using the system, not the decision makers, the developers, but the ones that are like putting content into the system and just want it to look like they are thinking it should.
Most really,
it'll be fine.
most really hate it, but it's such a diverse experience. That's a good question. I've dealt with a lot of them, and most people that I talk to who are upgrading a Drupal site, maybe they're on 7 or something like that and going to a new one, I ask them what they do and don't like about Drupal. And almost all of them say they hate the editing experience. And I've talked to a lot of those content authors or even more mature, huge teams of people where you have workflows, things like that. And also as somebody that does content migrations, sometimes manually, I can tell you it's a terrible experience. In most cases, you have to be very intentional to make the administrative user experience as good, if not better than the front end user experience. It's usually the other way around. It's usually crap in the back end. But I think that we're aware of it. You know, when we start to compare Drupal to like WordPress's editing experience and Gutenberg and things like that, and then we keep saying, well, Experience Builder is going to be this thing that helps realize those improvements. I am still convinced that it is highly dependent on the care that it takes in the implementation and a sensitivity to who is entering content, what type of content is it, how rich and complex is it, are they even educated? So that's another thing, is not only the experience, good design doesn't require instructions, right? But these are complex interfaces. You still need some sort of way to deal with that. Personally, I like to do training in short videos as opposed to documentation, because it's like, okay, how do I create an event? Let me watch a 3-minute video. I'm good.
Yeah.
Or documentation.
That's what I was thinking, Chad. Is just like when you said that, like when people say, "Oh, I hate it," you know what I mean? Like you know nothing because you have no idea what the implementation was, and you could maybe say it was 50-50 bad. You know, I mean, at least if you had any exposure to that topic. Yeah. So, but right, with a decent implementation, right? I just recently used like a decent implementation, right? I gave one of my developers some hours, you know, here's the paragraph models, you know, and I got to be a content editor because that was the best choice, you know, as far as that role from a domain knowledge perspective. And it was totally great. You know, I mean, I didn't have AI in there and I didn't really want it necessarily. But as far as the utility of that, and as far as good UI does not require documentation. Naturally, I have been a content producer for like 14 years, so that might help. But on the other hand, yet, boom, I could take someone else, like my wife helped out, and she's dabbled and been there before, but I'd be like, yeah, and then seconds, and she knew what I was conveying, and or at least I like to think she did. And the rapid content production, right, with just simple utilities, clone, paragraph, drag and drop, that kind of stuff. I mean, I was personally a paragraphs hater, years ago after panels, and so on. But hey, stuff matures, stuff gets better, and it has had staying power. Right. So the people that are in the weeds are like, hey, no, this is what we're going to, this is the best, even though, yeah, it can be a pain in the neck in various ways. So I don't know. I feel like proper setup, just like always, proper training, you've got a powerful tool. Why would you need better? What could you really even complain about, right? Other than maybe that lack of knowledge about how to get done what you needed to do.
And when you're inundating people with choices, that cognitive load just skyrockets. So being someone that works with UX a whole lot, one of the banes of any UX designer is forms. And that's all you have in the back end is forms. It's a terror when it comes to accessibility. It's a terror when it comes to just trying to guide people to the right choices, but at the same time give them control. So there's that balance of ease versus power. It can be very tricky in that regard. So you'll have collapsible areas tends to help with that. I'll digress though. I think that is obviously the area where it needs intention and care, but having worked agency so long, you don't have time or money for that. You're barely scratching the surface with the requirements that you have. So I think the way to circumvent that is you have to bake it into Drupal, a lot of these good practices and good UX design into the admin interface to overcome what those developers just don't have the budget to do. And we've seen it. We've seen it with Layout Builder. We've seen it a little bit with things like Site Studio and other solutions that keep trying to prop up to support that clear problem. And it's not pointing at one and saying, this is the solution. It's just more a matter of saying, there's a clear problem here, and we need something that's a little bit more turnkey that starts us off on the right foot. I want to digress even further, though, because we're almost out of time. We talked about a little bit about DrupalCon. We'll definitely want to see who wants that ticket that Ryan has. We talked a little bit about, well, quite a bit about Drupal's market demand, and I think it's really important for us to continue to talk about that as a community. Maybe we can have other focuses in our future meetups for things like, how do you get a job in Drupal? How do you mentor other people in Drupal? There are a few ideas for topics, but I'd like to be timely when it comes to topics. So next March, we're coming up on DrupalCon still. I think we did a good job of talking about it here. But if you have ideas for the next meetup, please put them in Slack. And then as a team, we can vote on what people most likely want to talk about in March. I think the next one, I'm just pulling up my cheat sheet here, is coming up. We try to aim for the first Wednesday of every month. So the next one's on the 5th of March. February has 28 days, so that makes it really easy to know where that falls. But any ideas for topics right off the top of your head that you would love to hear in March?
Six-second
Probably
rules.
this is pre-DrupalCon, right? Sorry.
Yeah, that would be pre-Drupal.
Always interested in discussing like design system integration stuff, like component-driven design type stuff. I've been looking into site auditing lately, like kind of how to plan for migrations and like modules and other tools for like investigating site structure, content relationships, and like usage of entities and fields.
Okay.
For like an optimization perspective?
If you're primarily for like migrations, so like planning, like consolidating content types or making changes to the content model.
Interesting.
Migration, you mean migration from Drupal to Drupal, or?
Primarily, yeah.
Oh.
But I feel like there's sort of a common process out there for sort of speccing out and planning a migration, the information architecture process.
Okay, nice.
We could ask Jay to come on the call too and talk about Drupal X and tell him that his layout builder's cool, but it could be a lot better, and like talk about how that could happen.
I haven't heard of Drupal X, so that'd be cool. That and
Yeah, so
new to me too.
you know, we put the project in there, but he's actually got a little marketing site going.
Okay.
So you might be able to like search it. You know, I think it only went up like a couple of weeks ago or whatever. But you know, Jay Callicut's the former VP of engineering at Media Current, so he was part of the layoff rounds, you know, that went when they got purchased, and he's now working. You said you're working on Cigna?
Yeah,
He's working on Cigna through Andy and ProMet, as far as I know. So I'm almost positive he's on that project. I could be wrong. Anyway, in any case, Drupal X basically has two flavors, headless and standard. Standard is meant to have Storybook involved. It uses Tailwind, and then it has ChatGPT configured in a landing page. In a landing page builder, where if you feed it, you know, he has set up, let's say, a dozen paragraph types that would be common. And then, you know, he can go in there and be like, you know, coffee store, and it will build a coffee store landing page for you, right? So if you could tell it, I need a landing page that looks like, you know, if basically I was like, great, let me have, you know, like, this is fantastic, let me take over, right? But no, it wasn't like that, because the prompts, it was limited to essentially single line prompts, right? That's all that this interface, et cetera, that he had set up could tolerate. And so it was kind of in the earlier phases, but still, you know, you could see where it was going, and that's what you wanted. And as a person who was building, like, who knows, like 700 pages with paragraphs, you know, many of which were, you know, industry pages or whatever, you know, similar layouts, I was like, well, you know, this would accelerate my task by, I don't know, you know, 45% at least. It was exciting. So anyway, and again, yeah, he's totally a one-man band, you know, type of thing. So it's like what he can do in his spare time while, you know, still grinding it out, you know, behind the keys. So he's looking for, you know, agency sponsorship. He's looking for people that think it's like, you know, Site Studio, but better in a way that it's effectively an accelerator tool, you know, that can tackle common repetitive tasks and, you know, crush them with AI in that builder sense rather than the content sense. I mean, I think Kevin, you know, Queelan's got that, and that whole group's got that kind of area covered.
Okay. All right. So I put together a couple items. What I think I might do is actually do kind of like a poll in our Slack channel. So if you aren't already in the Slack channel, definitely join. But I could do a poll or something, maybe with like emoji responses or something. But if you have other ideas, definitely throw them in that, and we'll vote on it in the next couple of weeks. But anything else that you folks want to bring up before we part ways?
Joomla screenshot. That's awesome.
Chat, did you capture Ryan's recommendation as well in the chat?
Yeah,
From the
yeah.
chat?
I wrote those in our notes here, and thankfully I dumped the whole chat into our Google Doc once everything converts.
Great.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Uncomfortable silence time?
Yeah, I don't know. We're already going to finish our meeting.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
because if you want, I can share some kind of a funny story which usually happen with me.
go for it, man.
Fine? Okay,
Before
yeah.
you-
I just why I decided to share this story because I noticed Andrew has like a Slavic name, and previous last year I've worked in Australia for State Library in New South Wales, and we had in Australia some kind Drupal meetups, and on that meetup we had a lot of people, and everybody has this is basic with name and first name. And it was like my first meetup, and I didn't know nobody, and my English was more worse than I have right now. It was like so awful. And I noticed uh, one man with a badge, and he has like some kind of Slavic name. And I decided he can speak on Russian. And I came to him and start speak to him on Russian. And he has like a so big eyes because he didn't understand nothing. Yeah. And he was from other countries. He was from South America, from Argentina, but he just has like a Slavic name and Slavic last name. And I was so confused. He was so confused. I was so confused. And since I decided to be pretty careful to start speaking in Russian with other people. It's was pretty funny, but yeah, sometimes I still have this is issue. Sometimes I can reach out people and try to speak with them in Russia because I decided they have like a Slavic name or Slavic last name. Yeah, that was my funny story.
That is hilarious, dude. That
Yeah,
has to
I
be really
can relate.
I can relate as well, where I try to like generalize entire, Eastern European regions. I'm like, come on, you're Ukrainian. You can speak Polish, right? It's like, no,
Yeah,
Chris,
yeah.
I cannot speak Polish. I'm like, all right, whatever.
Yeah.
Fine. All right, guys. Have a good night.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Sure, everyone.
See you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.